Hello and welcome. This is Heavy Business. I'm Aaliyah,
And I'm Curtis.
and we're here today with Bariann of Fiadh Records. Welcome to the podcast, Bariann,
Hi, thanks for having me on.
and thanks for coming. To start things off, would you mind giving us a brief overview of who you are and what you do within the realms of metal, and maybe a little bit about how you got there?
Sure. So right now I run a label called Fiadh Productions in New York, and it's just a small independent label, and our goal is to raise money and awareness for animal rights, welfare, and rescue, as well as promote, small independent bands and work with other labels, specifically anti-fascist labels internationally. We have a sister label in Europe, Fiadh Records, that we work really closely with, who have similar values, and that's the focus right now. I have a full-time job in animal rights, but the label does take up most of my time in terms of music and metal. Prior to that, I actually started as an intern, a PR intern at Earache Records at the Long Island City office. And I didn't have any experience prior to that. I was in school for PR, and I did that while I was working at an animal shelter, a pretty big one in communications. And then I went from there. From Earache, I started doing freelance PR. I worked at a PR agency, Musebox. We did some stuff with Century Media, Universal. Then I moved into other labels, specifically Halo of Flies, who I worked with for a really long time. And I ended up starting my own label called Broken Limbs Recordings. And I think I ran that for about 6 years. And then I just kind of needed a break. So I just went full time into animal rescue, animal welfare. And now I went back into animal rights, and I realized that, I did have a little bit of time, and I wanted to get back into music because I just really missed it. And I also decided to go back to school at the same time and have a baby. So everything kind of happened at once, and now I find myself back into it, like I think a lot of us have. So that's the long and short of it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like once you're in the music industry, I mean, it's possible that people can leave and like stay out forever, but I had the same kind of thing happen. I worked at a record label for a little while, and then I also needed a break. And then now I'm back doing this podcast. So
How
um,
did you get back into it? What pulled you back?
I think that being in a band, finally that was being active, made me start digging into the resources that were around on helping bands to promote and learning more about how to do that on my own. And then I found Curtis's podcast, and somehow I wiggled my way into being the host of the podcast.
She just slid in there, and then all of a sudden we're like, "Oh, she's doing this." We didn't even realize it, but
It's what we do. That's how women
it's
take
it's
control.
it's apparently the way it goes. Yeah, Aaliyah, I'll let you continue. Otherwise, I'm going to end up sticking my foot in my mouth.
That's all good. Um, Why don't we, can you give us a little background on like how you start an independent label like this, and some of the struggles associated with it or difficulties you encounter?
Sure. So I think, credibility is a big problem when you're first starting because everyone's really nervous. And I think it's normal for everyone to be anxious because everything is so public, everything is on social media, and you don't know who to trust, especially if you're coming in and you don't have any industry background. And I think that, having friends in the industry is great, but if you don't, where do you start if you don't know anyone? So I think that I had a bit of an advantage there because of my prior experience. I had a few people I trusted that I could talk to and really get back into it. But I think that what's really helpful for small labels that want to start is just knowing a few artists that you trust, that who trust you to promote their music with integrity. Just starting with one or two bands who have the same values and the same vision as you is the best place to start. And then they get your attention, your resources, and you kind of work hand in hand. And then once you see how that process goes with a record, a whole record release, maybe a tour, and by like making a small step like that, which I wish I had done, But I think once you watch the process once, you are more confident, and then you find yourself reaching out to bands who you might not know, who you might just be a casual fan of. And I think that, you know, just getting that experience, just doing it once and seeing it for yourself will give you the confidence to start branching out. But it's good to start with someone that you do know, because you do make mistakes. Everyone does. And if it's a friend, you guys can laugh about it together. You know, you don't have to lose sleep over it or anything like that. And I think also when it comes to capital, which is something that no one wants to talk about, it feels better to invest money in someone who you trust and who won't get mad at you that easily. But that's the way to do it. I would say just start with one or two artists that you have like a rapport with in a nice comfort level, if that makes sense. I hope that's good advice.
It's very good
Sounds like
advice.
great advice.
I have a quick question. Who was your first release again? I know it, but I can't freaking remember.
With Broken Limbs,
Yeah,
that was Vatnet Viscar.
that's
And
right.
yeah, so my
That's
first
right.
record was a 10-inch, and I didn't charge shipping because I didn't know that you have to do that. That's right.
Oh,
So
no.
I immediately launched this 10-inch that I made 100 copies of all by myself. So dumb, not knowing anything. And I put it up on Bandcamp, didn't charge shipping, $0. All of my orders were international. So
Nice.
yes.
No, the worst case scenario.
So I had about 20 orders for Japan, and I remember carrying them to the post office and then filling out all the forms, and I was like, this can't be right. This is not $22 a record. And it was. So yes,
Yes,
that
it
was my
is.
very first experience, and I learned the hard way. So now everyone who comes to me for advice, I was like, before you do anything, you set shipping. You set shipping right now, and you make sure that your international shipping is set for every country, because it will happen. You don't think you're going to get an order, it'll be from Indonesia. You need to be prepared.
Yep. So it was your first record, you basically lost your shirt by the sounds of it.
I sure did.
Just as an understatement. So what made you decide to, I have another question about the first release, but what made you decide to release another album after that catastrophe, out of curiosity?
Well, they ended up getting picked up by Century Media based on that one album. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm doing something right. And then Century Media also went after Gary's band, Carinier, like rightfully so, because he's so talented.
Yeah.
And then I was like, you know, I think that I am able to find bands that are really talented, but might not have the means, not, I mean, not, they have the awareness, they have the desire, they have the passion. They might not have the tools to get their music out there.
Yeah.
And I do.
Yeah.
So once I saw that people wanted to hear this music, I was like, why would I stop now? And I kept going. Same with Yellow Eyes too, who like now look at them.
Yeah.
I mean, like that was just, they're just incredible. But yeah, I think that even though I like financially that was a disaster, the experience was incredible.
I'm sure. Now another question. Okay, so I wanted to get into that with the Vatnet Viscar thing. So does that mean that you were shopping them to labels while they were on?
No, it was, I think they wanted to do more extensive touring, and they needed a vehicle, which Century Media offered them, as well as I think a 4-record deal. And so the goal is not to keep these bands. It's to, and I think like that causes a lot of animosity with some labels, especially with friends. I mean, you need to understand that your role as a small label is not to keep these bands to yourself. It's to help them get to that next level. And I think if a band gets a deal like that, you've both succeeded. You've done your job. You've done exactly what you set out to do. And that's to make that band a success. And we are not all millionaires with disposable incomes, and these labels have amazing resources that we just don't. And we're the bridge that gets them there if that's what they want.
I like this
philosophy. It does hurt. It does
I'm
hurt.
getting emotional hearing you say something like that. It's such a nice philosophy. It's really, really wholesome.
I mean, you have to look at it that way, because if you just put yourself in the musician's shoes, why would you deny them like a deal like that? I mean, it's unthinkable. That's their livelihood.
So your basic role or hat in life, I guess, as a label owner then is to develop talents. That way they can get away from you and get snapped up by a biggie.
If they want to, if they need it, yes.
Cool.
And I think you can tell the different bands have different priorities.
Of course.
I'm pretty good at, you know, figuring out what the priorities are and what the goals are. And, you know, if I'm working with another label, I might give them like a little nudge, just let them know like, hey, this band is looking to move on to bigger stuff. Don't take it personally. It's gonna happen. And, you know, be proud of yourself for the role that you played. So
I like it. I like it. Aaliyah, I'm done my follow-up for that bit.
So what would you say are like the differences? Do you do your own PR now for Fiadh Records, Fiadh Productions?
yeah, I mean, it would be really, really embarrassing if I outsourced that. So I didn't want to do PR again. I was like, oh no, 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 I don't want to do this. I don't want to bother people again. And then like here I am getting out my old contact list and stuff and like, hey, remember
Mhm.
me? It's me again. It's me, your girl. I'm back.
You're
Um,
back with your great taste.
I hopefully I've been sending out these horrible emails and I want to apologize if anyone is watching this who gets my promo emails with like 20 albums on there. I just like if I pay for a Holix account with my current release schedule, I will be in so much debt. I just can't do it. So that's another thing I want to talk about is if I don't know if that was on your schedule, was the best way to get music to journalists
By all
without
means,
using
let's dive
Holix.
into it. Let's do it.
So
Uh-oh, you're gonna get Holix out of this, but okay, go for it.
no, no, no. So I'm on the Holix website. I am their biggest proponent. I will
I
market
remember
them.
your testimonial was at
I'm
least right up front.
still my tweet is still on there,
Is
and
it?
yeah,
Okay.
my picture's no longer on there, but my tweet is on there.
I remember that.
But
Yep.
and I mean, Holix is so fantastic because I remember at Euric, I don't know what album it was, and if it was, if I did remember, probably shouldn't say it. There was a leak, and it was they were able to trace it because of the watermarking on a Holix file. And I think, you know, I don't think it happens that often, but with big labels like Universal, etc., they need that tool because the artists need to know that their music is protected. I mean, we saw what just happened with the whole thing with that poor 14-year-old kid in Russia.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I was like, oh, were they not using Holix? Like, how did that, you know, I don't know what Metal Blade uses, but
They
you
do
want to
use
protect the
Holix.
music.
They do
I
use
figure they
Holix.
did. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I want details, but yeah, but Holix, it's not affordable for independent artists. And for small labels like me, Holix, please restore my account for free. But
Matt's gonna kill me if he ever hears this podcast. But let's go.
I love Matt. Matt's fantastic.
I'm
He's such a
kidding, Barry.
great
I'm kidding.
he's such a great person. And he was actually he's very, very helpful to me. I will pay for Holix again when I can afford it. But I think without Holix, we see artists using Dropbox, we see artists using Google Drive, which is what I've been using. And that's one way to do it, but there's like no good solution for this. I mean, there's Bandcamp codes. I do Bandcamp codes and, you know, Google Drive, but like there's really no good solution that I'm seeing that like I think that gap needs to be filled. Some kind of like unless you know something that I don't. I mean, there's just like no good way to send promos these days.
Dropbox would be the only thing I can think of if you're not, or Bandcamp codes if you're not using Holix. Otherwise, you got Promo Jukebox, which is
And there's also SoundCloud. You can do unlisted private
yep,
links with SoundCloud.
yep.
I totally forgot about SoundCloud. You can,
So
yeah.
so Bariann, what do you do then? You're just like randomly shooting out emails and you're saying? I'm
It's not
confused.
it's not random.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sending it to people who who I've had contact before, who I
Of course.
know won't be like, what are you doing? Who hopefully will still tolerate me and my music. I'm not like, I'm not cold emailing, which no one should ever do.
Yeah.
But like, you know, just trying to give as much advance notice as I can without sending out an email every other week.
Fair.
Especially now, I can't even imagine how many emails journalists are getting these days. I mean, it could only have increased. I've
It
never
has.
been on that end of it. So my sister label, she ran Subterraneo, which was
Remember.
yeah, so she has that media side experience. So it's nice to be able to bounce stuff off her because she used to get the emails that we used to send that you
I didn't
send.
realize that was the same person, but now it's all
Yeah,
coming together. Okay.
So she used to get my promos, and I, it's like, it's not embarrassing, but it's like, oh, like, what did you think of my emails? She didn't
Yeah.
remember them, and I'm like, I guess it's good, not to not to be memorable in that way. But yeah, that's just like
Well,
one of the
that's
things that I've been trying to figure out this time around is the best way to do promos, because like as much as you don't want to do it, you have to.
yep.
Because like it's a disservice to the bands to not promote it. You just got to do it, and it sucks, but it's
So
necessary.
let's cover this a bit because you taught me a fair bit about PR. For those people that don't are listening, Bariann basically hired me for my first job, quote unquote, with her former PR company. So why don't we go into for a few minutes if Aaliyah's okay with this about PR? Okay, good. So since you're now not using Holics and you got the independent label thing going and you're doing your own PR, how do you kind of pitch? Are you doing the mass sendouts like Holics type things, or are you doing one-on-one then?
I'm doing an individual email per person.
Ooh, that's got to be
Yes,
tough. Wow.
it is. Yeah.
Okay.
So each one, like I do individual Bandcamp codes for everyone.
Oh, wow.
The email is the same format. I don't do like a huge write-up for each album like I used to.
Sure.
Like I don't do bios or anything unless I'm in music, because I'm not doing huge albums at this point, and I'm not
Sure.
doing a lot of the stuff I'm doing, it's stuff that's already out. And
Okay.
I think that's a lot of the reason. And bands need to know that if your album is already out, Bandcamp is not going to cover it. Print magazines are not going to cover it unless it's like a 90s hardcore reissue. It's like not getting covered.
Pretty much.
And like as much as it deserves to be covered, it's just not, you need that like 8 weeks, 3 month lead time. It's like it's still there. The internet hasn't changed that. It's not changing the lead times that you need. So stuff that's been out in Bandcamp for like 2 years, I'm putting on tape. And it's just like hard to explain that as good as the album is, how do you pitch that to someone?
Hard.
Yeah, but you got to do it anyway. So that's
Yeah.
why you throw it into an email with a bunch of other stuff. Maybe like one album will, like the latest email I sent, I think 2 albums were new and like 12 of them weren't. But there's something for everyone in there. But yeah, like I always recommend personalized emails because it makes a difference. And
Agreed.
it sounds so old-fashioned, but it really is the best thing you can do is take your time, see who's writing for what, find out their name. If they have pets, find that out if you can. I mean, for me, it's important because I
Don't
don't
ask
live
about
near
children,
photos.
but you can ask about pets.
Never
No one,
ask about
no one
kids.
cares. No one cares
I
about your kids.
yeah, I don't want anybody to ask about my kids. You'll notice I've never once asked you about your kids, Bariann. Not once.
I mean, why would you? Who cares? I don't.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. That's the thing.
I
Yeah.
only mentioned that because Curtis has said people tried to do that to him
I have
sometimes.
people do that to me all the time. How's your
That's
kids?
really weird.
It
I
is
mean,
weird.
I don't love that. That
I
like
hate it.
doesn't. I don't like it.
How's your kids? Why do you care? Like,
Yeah, like what are you gonna do with that information? Why does
yeah,
it matter?
exactly.
It's
Exactly.
nice, it's polite, but it's like I want to know about how's your dog? How's your dog? Because I want to see the dog. I do care. I care about the dog and I want to see it.
I don't know if you asked me about my cat. I don't know how I'd feel about that. We'll have to have that conversation at some point.
I want to know how the cat is now.
Well, I have two, just so you know.
How are
Both
they?
they're pretty good. One of
Okay.
them's very fat. The other one's very playful. One's a kitten. One's a boy.
There's
I wish
always
one's
like
a girl. One's a boy. Rather.
one overweight. If there's more than one cat, one is always overweight. I don't know why. It's like the
Because
rule
they
of cat.
probably eat the other one's food.
There you go.
Bariann's good. She's got me caught talking about my cat. Leah, you gotta get us back on track here.
Okay,
Sorry,
what I
I'm
wanted
so
to ask
sorry.
about PR, and I guess obviously the Holics thing is one major factor that's different, but are there any other differences you find between doing PR for a major PR company like Earache or a major label like Earache and doing them for your own label?
Resources, physical copies. I used to send them out all the time, even with Broken Limbs. We used to set aside like 5 or 10 copies that we would send to magazines. Yeah, can't do that anymore. I mean, no, because Eric, like we had a massive warehouse.
I'm thinking broken limbs. Earache, fine. I'm just going to ouch for the broken limbs. That
Yeah,
must
even that hurt.
hurt.
No, I mean, but it was worth it. Like with Fiadh, like I'll send, I mean, I'm making like 30 copies of stuff. So, and each like per unit copy, like I'll be totally transparent with that. Sometimes I'm paying $8 a tape that I'm charging $10 for, and then Bandcamp takes like 10% of that. So like
you're
no
making
money,
no profit.
no money is being made, and anything gets donated. So it's like it hurts me to not be able to give physical copies to people because I actually really like doing that. And people really appreciated that, especially at Eric, and you know, especially with Morbid Angel reissues, that people
I'm
always
sure.
wanted this.
I'm
But
sure.
yeah, I think with major labels, you have that resource. You also, interviews are more of a thing that you can pitch, exclusives, you know, especially if you have like a band that's about to tour, then you can do local press, regional press, stuff like that, in-person stuff, in-person interviews. You know, smaller labels, you can still do that. You know, like a label, like I wouldn't even call Gilead small, but like
Nope.
they have a lot of bands that tour, you know, they can do that kind of stuff. And it depends on the genre too. Major labels have bands that tour all the time, and that's an important part of their income. And I think independent labels, not so much.
Yeah.
The touring is kind of separate. It's not outsourced, or it's not in-house. It's totally different. So that's like not even part of the press consideration. So that's different. You know, with major labels, touring is a big part of PR. The other difference is probably you're expected to get print coverage with major labels, and the relationship is more like long-standing, and the advertising, you're paying for ad space sometimes.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you have that. Definitely not paying for any kind of advertising with independent labels that I know of.
Nope. Nope. I had a quick question, unless Aaliyah, did I cut you off, Aaliyah?
No, go ahead.
So I keep coming back to one question I had, and I didn't want to ask you this, but you keep mentioning like you do like 30 bands in one email. How does that work?
It's not 30, it's for like maybe like 12.
How do you do? Okay, how does this work? I'm just trying to figure it out, because I'm not being a dick. I'm just trying to
No, I'm
understand.
not saying it's a great strategy. I'm just saying it's just like
What do you do
less stuff
though?
comes up. You just list them.
Okay.
You list them. I do like a 1-sentence description now, and I'm not saying like this is what people should be doing. This is just what I'm
Of
doing
course.
for now.
Yeah,
Is
I'm trying to understand what you do.
I haven't gotten time to like get like a template really
Okay.
going. So I just list the release dates, and like a lot of this stuff is kind of last minute. A lot of bands are like, hey, I'm releasing this digitally next month, and I already have like this YouTube channel premiering it. And I'm like, like shit, you
Mm-hmm.
know. What am I gonna do? Gotta like send it out. So it's just like a list, little description. What, you know, if there's a nonprofit that it's benefiting, I'll list that because I think that's important.
Totally.
And you know, if it's gonna be with another label, just like the basics, and then a link to the album. And you know, like if there's, I don't really do photos at this point, but yeah, it's not great, but it's what I'm doing for now.
Well, I mean, your name is getting around, so I'm sure it's
I
somewhat
hope
effective.
so.
It seems to be, at least to me. Okay, so I want to go back to the label end, if Aaliyah's okay with that.
I actually wanted to go back to the label end also.
Then I'll let you start
Go
and
ahead.
I'll continue.
Okay. You mentioned that you have reached out to bands to be on your label, or that when you start a label, you find a few bands that you want to reach out to and start your label with. Do you think that bands should be expecting labels to reach out to them, or should they be reaching out to labels?
That's a great question. Because I had someone who I trust very much tell me that labels should do the ignoring, not the bands. And I don't know if I agree with that. You know, like you get those mass pitches from bands. We've all seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Like X, like whatever, looking for a release, or like literally like, please, bro, put this out.
Yep.
So I mean, it like really depends on the approach. I think that if you get an email from a label, if you're a band, like I wouldn't expect it. I don't know, but I would consider it, and I would read it, because this person like might be starting their label based on your release. Like you never know. Like you could be the start to this label, this era. And it sounds like really, really silly, but I mean, I think that if you get an email from a small label, like they're really risking something for your band. And that is very meaningful these days, because financially, a physical release, I don't think that bands know the reality of it unless they press it themselves. You're putting a lot on the line. And if a label reaches out to you and it's like not even major labels, I mean, that's still capital. But if a small label reaches out to you, you need to understand that they're not just reaching out to you because they want you on their roster. They're reaching out to you because they want to invest in you, to risk their, not only their finances, but their credibility, especially with all the stuff going on with so many sketchy artists and labels. It's their credibility on the line. And I think that for that dynamic, for labels reaching out to bands, that's something that I think is really important to understand, if that makes sense.
Sure. Now, what could be some major red flags if a band got an email from a label or a message? What are red flags that maybe they shouldn't go with that label?
Always look at the roster, always look at the past releases, do your research. I can't stress that enough. Metal Archives is a great tool. I mean, it's our only tool sometimes.
And
even like
it's
it is great. Even like Facebook groups, like a lot of them do have a lot of information on stuff. Like I think we're all talking about like sketchy NS stuff for the most part, like fascist stuff. Because it's all over the place and it's a growing problem. And I think a lot of us are in denial, especially in the United States, that it is a huge growing threat in Europe and it's only going to get worse if we're not vigilant about it. So if you see anything remotely sketchy, question it, look further into it, ask around, don't be afraid to ask the label. Like, did you know that this artist did this? Did you were you aware of it? How do you feel about it? And don't be afraid to say no based on if you see one thing that sketches you out, that's all you need. And don't risk it. But if it seems like something that happened after the fact or whatever, or there's context for everything. So don't just write everything off, but definitely don't be afraid to ask questions if you see red flags like that. But look at the past roster, look at the past releases. Usually if something happened, you'll see something on Twitter. Usually it'll be Twitter first. And then you'll see it on Discord, and then you'll see it on Reddit. So, but we just Google stuff. Just Google everything. But
Metal Archives is your friend.
Yeah, it is. And we love to hate it because it always disappoints us and lets us down because we're like, oh man, this band is so good. I don't want to look it up because then, inevitably there's some asshole in there. So.
And we've all made the mistake of accidentally doing something with one of these people and then realizing later.
Yeah.
That or catching it just in time.
I've caught it just in time. Yes, I have caught it just in time recently.
How did you catch it?
Well, I'll tell everybody the story here because I don't really give a fuck. A while back, I'm not going to say how long, if it was recent or in the long past, we had a label reach out to us, and they said they had this band featuring two members of two extremely well-known black metal bands. So you would think there would be absolutely no problem.
That was your first red flag. It was extremely well-known black metal band.
But they were well-known and the major labels, both of them. Sell lots. I'm not going to say the band. I'll tell you off camera, obviously, if you remember. So we were like, okay, cool. Music sounds good. One of the tracks had already premiered in an established place, so everything looked good. For some reason, we did not bother to check the background. We just looked at the lyrics. We looked at the imagery. We listened to music. Everything sounded fine. And I got asked to pitch they paid. And, so then I got asked to pitch the first song to this very major publication because it's got these well-known members of well-known bands in it. And I was about to send the pitch, and I had this idea. I should look on Metal Archives just to double check these guys weren't in anything else major that I should know about. And one of the guys was in a obvious National Socialist band about 6 years ago. And he's currently in another band with imagery for sure. So yeah, we just had to say, here's your money back. Yeah, that's how I found out.
You did the right thing. And that was another good point that you brought up, was looking at the lyrics. Always look at the lyrics if they're available, because I wanted a black thrash band so bad. I love black thrash. And I was like, I need this in my life. And I still do. I still want more black thrash. And then I found this band. And so black thrash in general, you're looking at sex, tits, drugs.
Always.
It's not good. It's not good. And I'm pretty wholesome but I still I love
Runs a black label, metal label is wholesome. Okay, very.
I mean, I just
is wholesome.
I try I don't want that whole, like, I don't want to like anything that objectifies women unless the women are fine with it or the women are writing it.
Of course.
So I found a band, of course they're from South America because that's where the best black thrash comes from.
Obviously.
And I was like, this looks okay. There's like a few questionable song titles. So I wrote to them and they were so nice. And they're like, listen, look at your label. Please look at our lyrics and then let us know if you still want to do this. And I looked at the lyrics and I was like, oh, I'm so glad that you said something, because
at least they said it.
It was really bad. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like horrible. I'll show you later, but like it was like not something that I was so comfortable with. And it was like such a nice exchange because I was like, I really appreciate you bringing that to my attention. I'm a personal fan. I'm going to buy your tape, but you know, I can't put this out. And now like, I see that they're putting it out with a different label and I'm like, that's like, I'm so happy for them. But like, that's just an example of me not being diligent and looking at the lyrics, which I, especially with black thrash, I should have done. But yeah, always look at the lyrics.
We've all been there. What we do now is we now actually have a little form and we actually ask certain questions. We're like, anybody tied to any bands of you know, this ideology?
That's a great idea.
It's what we did. So
that's smart.
Yeah. Ali, I'm getting off track again. Bring me back.
Okay.
Bring me back.
I actually wanted to ask about cassette tapes because we had someone talking about these on a recent episode as well, and the resurgence of the cassette tape.
She's been doing them since like 2012.
Some of the releases you're doing, you're only doing on cassette, right?
Most of them, yeah.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about the advantages and the appeal of a cassette release?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is an aesthetic. It's a vibe. It really is a vibe, isn't it? So I also want to say that it's a travesty that I have to charge $10 for cassettes now when I used to charge $6. It's awful. Even like the best plants, like the best prices that I've gotten, nothing is less than like, you can maybe get like $4 a tape if you're making like 200 of them. But I mean, that's like really rare.
Like what level of artist would make 200 tapes?
Not anything that I'm doing. I mean, if you're like an artist that's like also doing a big vinyl run, like my brother just ordered the obituary tape, limited run of 200, like that kind of thing.
Okay, so like obituary level can do 200 tapes.
I mean, like I could probably, I don't know. I don't think I've ever done 200 tapes.
I was gonna say, don't you normally do a run of 50 to 100, or am I crazy?
If I'm doing it with the European label, then it's, sorry, I just cut you off. It's 100 sometimes. Okay. A lot of the plants have a minimum of 50 in Europe. But here, obviously, duplication doesn't have a minimum. I don't know if NAC does. I haven't worked with NAC in a while, but I think that most plants with great prices have a minimum of 50. So if
you do 50-ish then, as
no,
a general.
I do like 30 to 50 usually.
Okay, I just picked a random cassette on yours and it's an edition of 50. That's why I asked that question.
You picked one of the few ones where I went high. Yeah.
Nice. So question on the cassette thing then. So Ali, I don't know if you know, she's been doing cassettes since like 2012 or 2011, before they were cool. So what made you
now they've always been cool, but the general public didn't know they were cool.
Fair. So how did you kind of decide to start doing cassettes then as well, I know it wasn't your first because you did VatNet, but you know what I mean? Like as a general, like Broken Limbs was mainly known for cassettes, if my recall is correct.
We did have a lot of vinyl, but I think...
And CDs too. But I thought it was mainly cassettes.
No CDs. We only...
I have a CD from you.
We did CDs in the very beginning. Yeah. I did like those like really CDRs and sleeves. Yeah. And we did a digipack for Oak Pantheon, but after that, so I personally don't like CDs. I mean, I'm into them now. Yeah. For obvious economic reasons. I think they're finally growing on me. So I have this memory from, and I won't do this again, this is my one memory thing, from 7th grade, where my friend gave me like an unseen CD to borrow, and I closed the locker and it like the whole jewel case cracked and it went everywhere. And I was like, I hate CDs, I hate jewel cases. So I like to have this horrible association with jewel cases. I'm like anti-jewel case and everyone is pro jewel case.
It protects the artwork, but I get it.
I'm like all about cassettes because they are so portable. Cassette players are really, really cheap, like the the Walkman ones or whatever. And I just think that it gives you a lot of opportunity for art. I mean, so does CDs, but
Mhm.
with cassettes, it's more of like a visual, like hand, like very physical, like tactile kind of facet to it that's really unique. And I just like how like small and cute they are, I guess.
Mhm.
I always like that. And I always just like that the design aspect. There's just like so much room for art. And you can do so many cool things with like inserts and like there's just so many like tiny decisions you can make along the way for each release that makes it unique. And I really, really like that about it. If that
Cool.
tracks, yeah.
That makes sense. Now, how many, out of curiosity, since we forgot to ask this, how many vinyl do you normally do when you do a release?
100. I mean, for Broken Limbs, we had bigger runs of like 250.
Okay.
I think it was like 200, 250. I think we did one where it was like 500. Depends on like the variants and stuff. But I
Fair.
mean, you can't really do less than 100. Plants won't do. I mean, someone like recently asked about doing 50, and I looked it up for fun. For
Mhm.
50 records, it's like $1,200, and then for 100, it's like $1,500. So it's like, why
Crazy.
bother? But
S-
most
Yeah.
plants, like their minimum is 100 anyway.
Are you willing to talk about the type of deals you offer, or is that off the table?
Oh, I can talk about it. So I don't
Cool.
do contracts or anything.
Cool.
Never did.
Cool.
The deals I do, I don't do anything exclusive. The music stays with the artists. They can do whatever they want with it. I tend to not even want to deal with digital anymore because all like the fees that get taken out with Bandcamp, just not worth it.
Yeah.
And then like when you pay the artist, more fees get taken out with like PayPal and stuff. So it's like,
Hmm.
so that's why, and like I know this can be really frustrating for people who want to buy digital. That's why like I set it at like 666. So they go buy the digital directly from the artist because that's who needs to
Ah,
benefit.
that's a common question. I knew that, but that's a common
Yeah.
question that people have.
Why is everything 666? Is that
Yeah.
the question?
Yeah. Why is it like 666 or 999? Some labels are 777 or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, that's why I think some labels do it because maybe they have like different distribution, like digital distribution deals
Yeah.
with like the Orchard or whatever. But yeah, so I just do that because it's just too many fees and it just takes away. I do have digital available if the artist wants to donate it. So that's on the table for them. So any digital stuff that I get gets donated to the organization of the artist's choice. I give them 10 to 20% of physical copies. Some bands don't want that many copies.
Hmm.
They're not touring. They just like don't want the clutter.
Hmm.
So it's really each deal is individual. It's just like whatever they want to do. And if they want stuff to be distributed in Europe, like we can do that. It's just it's pretty casual. More like just dealing in physical copies because when it comes to digital stuff, that's like major label
Yeah.
minutia.
I
It's
get it.
just not worth it, I don't think, for small labels.
So
Yeah.
now, what do you do? Because correct me if I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong, that's fine. Each release is benefits whoever the artist wants, correct?
That's right.
So what if the artist decided to pick a charity that you don't like? What would you do in that case?
Why wouldn't I like a charity?
I don't know. Like it could be something you don't agree with. Like I don't know. Like I mean, I'm not into every single
That's a good
charity out there. I
question.
don't know. But what
Like if
would
it
you
was
do?
a problematic charity,
Well,
I
no,
mean,
let's say it's not problematic. Obviously, it's not like the National Socialist Nazi Fund or something like that. I mean, like I don't know, like something you're not in, like the Hunters Association because you're pro animal, like that, right? So let's
yeah,
say
I
it was
mean,
like that.
we would have a larger discussion about like aligning values, and I don't think I would be working with the artist.
Fair.
I mean, there are some arguments for like conservation, but a lot of that's false. It's fake, it's not true.
I'm just
But
asking.
that's no, it's okay. That's like something that I'm very passionate about. But hunting does not equal conservation. That's all I'm gonna say.
Fair.
But I mean, they can do whatever they want with what they make, but if it's being donated, because I make the donations personally, like through my PayPal, my bank account, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, if it's something I'm not comfortable with, I would just tell them. I just be
Fair.
like, let's do something else. I mean, that hasn't happened, but that's a good question. I think that most of the artists know coming into it what I'm about.
Fair.
And I think they because a lot of them asked my advice on what nonprofits I think are good, or they're like, oh, like I like pollinator species. Can you recommend a charity? So it goes more in that direction. But yeah, I haven't disagreed with the charity yet, but
Sure.
hopefully, no, I mean, it's a good question. Hopefully it won't come to that.
Could happen. Yep.
Yeah.
I think we need to wrap.
Yeah,
Oh,
I had
sorry,
one
Leah.
more question about cassettes before Curtis decided to change the direction of the conversation.
Sure.
Do you think there are genres of metal that are more suited to cassette than others?
Yes, 100%. I would say that more of, and this is gonna like sound obvious, but it's not a cop out, more like the lo-fi black metal stuff, noise sounds great in cassette. Like the highly produced folk metal, power metal, it's still gonna sound great. And actually, I actually like power metal on cassette. That wasn't the right choice. I do think that like the one person projects that are produced in a certain way, and I think we all know, sound better on cassette. And I think the bands that have like a fuller sound, and I'm talking more of like technical death metal kind of stuff, like that's like feels
Like
very
really
CD,
pristine
very
production.
CD to me. Yeah, especially if you have stuff with like higher tones. I think that, or even stuff with like really low tones that can get lost. I think, yeah, I think it's hard to do like a whole genre, but I think that black metal is really well suited to cassette because production is not what we're investing in most of the time. It's more of just, I hate saying it, it's more of the vibe. So
Got you. Got you. Well, this has been really educational and interesting. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast again.
no, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time and your great questions.
Oh, thanks for complimenting my questions.
Of course.
Everyone listening, I hope you learned something helpful today. And until next time, make like a bull and throw those horns up.